Off day today, so I'm ready for a big picture type of question, plus a mailbag coming up. But first, should the NHL expand the playoffs for the Buffalo Sabres? It's not as crazy as it sounds. I'll let you know coming up what I mean here on the Locked On Sabres podcast.
Your Locked On Sabres, your daily podcast on the Buffalo Sabres. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thanks for making Locked On Sabres your first listen every day. Sneaky Joe DiBiase here, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are encouraging you, as always, to check out our Locked On Sabres text line. Join subtext.com/Locked On Sabres if you would like to get in on a mailbag like we're going to have today, or you've got a question or comment throughout the week, or we want to get into it during the game itself. Join subtext.com/Locked On Sabres where you can sign up today and then text for the remainder of it. So, lot to get to on today's show. It is an off day for the Sabres. They are not in action until Friday night, hosting the Philadelphia Flyers before a couple of games on the road as we are nearing the end of the season. Only 6 games to go for the Sabres. They are 5 points out of a playoff spot. It doesn't sound that bad, but you're 6 points out. Very, very, very unlikely to make it. Coming up a little bit later on, I will have a scenario that Sabres Live broke down on how they could get in, and it does kind of show off just how unlikely it is. Also on today's show, a mailbag from you guys, Amerks playoff check-in, where they're at in the standings, and some roster movement in the last couple of days that starting to show what that lineup might look like. A question about Matt Savoie and the Amerks, which was a stupid situation last year, and I don't know whether it's going to be dumb again this year. Before we get to all of that, though, it's an off day. We're between Sabre games here, and the playoffs are approaching for the NHL. And I wanted to get into a little bit today, a commentary and a topic that Elliot Friedman broke down on 32 Thoughts this week. And it kind of has me using the Sabres, as Elliot did, as an example of why the NHL might want to consider expanding their playoffs, but in a very specific way. Now, before we get into the details of this proposed scenario, that would basically be a carbon copy of what the NBA does, which I think is the way to go about it. There are financial reasons as well. And of course, there are selfish bias reasons because we are sick and tired of not having playoff hockey here in Buffalo. Any form of it would be accepted, I think, by most. Before, though, we get into the specifics of it, just know I am aware of the counter argument, and I am aware of the simple fact that would make me hesitant too, that you already have half the teams that make the NHL playoffs. There are 32 teams in the league. 16 make it. For a while there, more than half the league made it. And one thing that Friedman said in his talk about it was, find me another sport that has expanded its playoffs and regrets it. Major League Baseball expanded their playoffs. They had the wild cards added, right? The NFL expanded their playoffs. They added a wild card team a couple of years ago. The NBA has their play-in tournament expanding the playoffs. All 3 of the other leagues have expanded their playoffs in recent times. And for the most part, I think Elliot's right. I don't think any of those leagues regret going into the playoffs or expanding their playoffs. One difference, though, that's very key that I will point to why the NHL is different, and it's a point I've already made. Where was Major League Baseball coming from? Nobody made the playoffs. It was like 6 out of 30 teams made it before they expanded. NFL, it was 12 out of 32 teams made the playoffs before they expanded. The NBA, that's the one that's similar, right? That's the one where it was the same as the NHL, and that's why I just want to directly look to the NBA. I want to throw out the NFL and Major League Baseball for this because they already had so few teams make it. It made total sense for them. And it didn't have to be that creative. They just added teams into their existing playoff format. The NBA wanted expanded playoffs, but they did not want to just have a 10-team field. So what Friedman campaigned for, and what I would campaign for too, is the 2 added play-in teams in each conference. Instead of 1 through 8 gets in, you have 10 teams get in. You have 7, 8, 9, and 10 play in a 1 or a 2 game series. And the winner of the 9-10 has to play the loser of the 7-8 game, and the winner of that game goes through. So working from the top down, if this will make it more clear, if you're not familiar with the NBA rules, the 7 seed in the NBA plays the 8 seed on a certain night, and the 9 seed plays the 10 seed. The winner of the 7 versus 8 game is through to the playoffs. You only got to win 1 game if you're the 7 or the 8 and you're the 7. If you lose, you still have a chance if you're the 7-8 loser. The 9-10 matchup, they play. The winner of the 9-10 goes to play the loser of the 7-8. The loser of the 9-10 is eliminated. You're done. And then the next night, we play the winner of 9-10 against the loser of 7-8. Winner gets the 8 seed. That is the NBA playoff format. So the 9-10 teams have to win 2 games to get in. The 2 out of 2. The 7 or 8, they got to win 1 out of 2. So you still have the advantage of being the 7-8 over the 9-10. And what that format does, and it's so smart, is it creates different levels of races. You have a race for the 6 seed. A race for the 6 seed that is very important. So if you are a team that is around the play-in tournament, or you're a team that's at the 5, this year, for instance, the Toronto Maple Leafs, maybe, for instance. The Toronto, not even Toronto. Tonight, this, I guess, is a bad year because there's such a gap in the Eastern Conference between the 7 and the 6. In the West, you would have it, though. But imagine you're the 5 seed in the East on a given year, and you're 9 points clear of the 9 seed. You don't care. Seasons, cruise control. Get us to the playoffs. But now, under this format, well, you might be 9 clear of the 9, but you're only 3 points clear of the 7. You better be careful, because if you drop down into that play-in, then you could be eliminated without even reaching the playoffs, theoretically. So you're creating a race for 6. It's important to get to 6. You have a race for 8, because the 7 and the 8 have an advantage over the 9-10, and you have a race for the 10 just to get into the thing. All different levels of races. And that's exactly what you're trying to get. The most important games possible. And the Sabres, for instance, this year would be, right now, they are 5 points out with 2 more games played than the Washington Capitals, and they have to beat out 4 teams to get that spot. It's not going to happen. But under this format, 10 teams make it. You'd be 4 points behind the Islanders. They only have 1 more game to play than you do. And you have 3 targets now. Instead of instead of the way I should say it is, instead of 4 teams to climb over, you only have to climb over 2. It would be a lot more realistic. And the race in the last month would have been a real race. And this is what Friedman's overall point was, and I agree with it, is the NHL and why they should want to do this. They are the most gate-driven league in sports. The NBA and the NFL especially, and also Major League Baseball, thrive on their TV money. They have monster TV contracts. Look at the percentage of revenue in each of these leagues, and the TV revenue versus the gate revenue, the ticket revenue. And the TV revenue is king for the NFL, for the NBA, and Major League Baseball. For the NHL, TV revenue is still important, not nearly as much. They are very reliant on people coming to their games, buying tickets, buying beer and drinks and food at the arena, merchandise. They are very reliant on that economy to work for them. So what I would say to that, and I would use the Sabres as an example. I don't need to make them the reason, but they are an example. You want tickets. You want people in the building. And for that, you need games that people care about. And this would be a way to do it. I've talked this season wondering about the long-term sustainability of the Buffalo Sabres. And part of the reason why is fans have stopped going to games because they're so bad, but also because they don't play meaningful games. This would be giving the fan base, hey, if the team can't do it, screw it. All right, NHL, you do it. And they might. They just very might. We'll give you the meaningful games, Sabre fans. Your team can't do it, so we'll do it for you. You're now in a playoff race. Congratulations. And now you might actually make the postseason. Last year, they would have been in the play-in tournament, and Sabre fans would have gone nuts for that. And you would have had more races. You would have had more tickets. You would have had, even if it's only, this Tuesday night game, Jeff Skinner night, maybe instead of 14,000 fans, maybe there's 16,000 fans in the building because 2,000 more fans think they can make the playoffs and want to go see it happen, make the play-in at least. And that's money. Those couple of thousand fans, that's money. That's beer money. That's parking money. That's an economy that you are seeing in front of your eyes. And I think it makes a lot of sense while also not completely, changing up the playoff formats. It's playing games. I think if you watch the NBA, you know that this thing works. You know that it creates entertainment. You know that people care about it. And it's not really that gimmicky. In the surface, it feels gimmicky, but once you start to see it in action, you realize that it's really not a gimmick. It's just a smart, sensible idea that fans like. Fans, if there's pushback at the start, guarantee you once it happens, you can tell me right now, that's stupid. Just leave it 1 through 8, whatever. And then the moment the Buffalo Sabres are hosting the Pittsburgh Penguins in a play-in game, winner goes to the playoffs as the 7th seed to go play the New York Rangers. You are going to be at that game. You are going to be fired up. You might even be at the party in the plaza because you'll be so into it. The Sabres are the example of why the NHL should do this. You have too many teams. It's not just Buffalo. Ottawa is good for this. Detroit, who is on a 7-year losing streak and has had some fan interest start to wane a little bit. You have a lot of teams around the league that when they're dead, people don't show up. And the Sabres have been dead for a long time. Ottawa's been dead for a long time. Detroit has been dead for a long time. Anaheim has been dead for a long time. And if you could create games that those fans will care more about, because you're creating races in each conference, I think it's a very smart idea. Cap would go higher too because there's more money in the league, so it's good for the players. It's good for the owners because they're making more money. It's good for everybody. The last thing I'll say on this, my bet is, though, they don't do it until there's expansion again. Again, the point about more than half the teams making it, I bet you have to wait till expansion, which I think we're going to get. Atlanta showing interest again. Quebec City has always been interested. You've got other cities around the country. Houston, for instance, that have always been looking for a team. Salt Lake City is the new one on the block this year. I think they're going to expand at some point. And when they do and go to 34 teams, it is absolutely the right decision that they should do this play-in tournament idea. When we come back, Amerks. Who's down there? Who's going to be going down there? Why you should care about the AHL playoffs, which are upcoming. Coming up here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, we are presented by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need, maintaining your vehicle and leveling it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive. ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Back here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, they can making us your first listen every day. If you're looking for Stephon Diggs coverage, be sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the first ever 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. If you're sick of all that screaming on Fox Sports or ESPN, turn down the volume there and put on Locked On Sports Today. Free Amazon Fire TV channels app and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we get to what's going on with the Amerks, your droughtology of the day for the Buffalo Sabres. And I do believe this is some good trivia that you should use for your friends, your buddies, whenever the next time you're looking for a question like this. Sabres droughtology of the day. There are 11 Hall of Famers that have played a playoff game more recently than the Buffalo Sabres have. 11 Hall of Famers. You could play the guessing game. Now, this is not radio. This is podcast. So hit the pause button. See if you could figure out a chunk of them, and then come back and I'll give you the answers. If you want to hang around, just find out the answers yourself. I'll give them to you right here. 11 Hall of Famers that have played in the playoffs more recently than the Sabres. At the bottom, a guy that I always use for this, and it's incredible to me that he did it. Mike Modano has played a playoff game more recently in the Sabres. 2 for the Detroit Red Wings, who he played for right at the end of his career. Chris Pronger has done this. Nicholas Lidstrom, Daniel Alfredson, Mark Recchi, Teemu Solani has played a playoff game more recently. Jerome McGinley, Daniel Sedin, Henrik Sedin, Marty St. Louis, and Marian Hossa. Those are your 11 Hockey Hall of Famers have finished their careers, gone through the period of time you have to wait to make the Hall of Fame, made the Hall of Fame, all in the amount of time the Sabres have had their playoff drought. Good question of trivia if you're looking for it. The Amerks, Devin Levi back to Rochester, and I would imagine for the finality of the season in Rochester, I would expect the next time he puts on blue and gold, it will be next season. Levi has been unbelievable on the year. 20 games played in Rochester, a .928 save percentage. He is one of the best goalies in the AHL. I think he had the second highest save percentage at last when he got called up last. And if you look in comparison to the other goalies in Rochester, Levi a .928 save percentage, Dustin Tokarski an .890 save percentage, Michael Hauser an .871 save percentage. They need Devin Levi for this playoff run. Now, they're pretty good. They're probably going to be fine making the postseason. In the North Division, 5 of the 7 teams make the playoffs. The Amerks, at this point in time, are in second place. They have 77 points, and they are only 3 points away from first. They also, that division matters for finishing top 3. If you finish 4th or 5th, I've just talked about play-ins, you basically have to play a play-in to get to the next round, the final 4, if you will, of the North Division in the AHL. And as it stands, the Amerks are 4 points clear of that, with only a few games to play. They have 7 games remaining. So Levi goes down there. They next play on Saturday at Providence, and before they have a while before they're home. So they need him. That team is starting to heat up a little bit again when it comes to the prospects. Yuri Kulik has been playing a little bit better as of late, although he's still not finding the back of the net as much as you would hope. But I'm excited for the playoff run in Rochester. It was exciting last year. They went all the way to the semifinals playing the Hershey Bears. Isaac Rozan, Yuri Kulik are playing great again. Although, as I mentioned, they've kind of slowed down in the second half of the year. That's mostly it for me, though. I mean, we know the guys. Lucas Rusek down there, Brandon Byro, Brett Murray, Michael Mursch, Linus Weissbach. Like, there are some overagers down there. But the prospects that you are going to care about are going to be Kulik, Rosine, and Devin Levi. And then, also Anton Wahlberg, who just showed up there, second-round pick. I don't know what they plan on doing with him in terms of playing. He's played 2 games, 1 assist in the 2 games. We'll see how much he plays in the playoffs. And then we'll see who else gets there. Because Matthew Savoie, we're talking about here. Also Noah Ostlund, who I think is eligible to go there after his season ends. But I don't know the timing of that and whether or not he actually will. But Savoie is the one that's more interesting to me. What is Rochester's plan going to be with Matthew Savoie after what happened last year? And if you remember what happened last year, the Amerks got Matt Savoie after his junior season had ended. They put him in for 2 games in the AHL semifinals, and he did not play well. He did not do much at all, kind of disappeared, didn't play well at all. But it was only 2 games. And it was at the end. Like, part of it is, hey, the season's on the line, right? So what did they do? They benched him. They did not give him that experience. They did not give him that opportunity to get big, meaningful games in the AHL playoffs as the one of the best prospects and important players in the Sabres organization. What they did instead was they played Austin Strand, who was a 8th defenseman who had played 11 games total for the Amerks as their 7th defenseman. Now, they put him in the lineup, and they took Savoie out. And there was other roster moves too, but that was like the one that stuck out to me. Wait a minute, you're putting this guy in your lineup after not playing at all in the playoffs, and you're taking Savoie out? Listen, I understand if you want to take Savoie out because you've got some guy on the bench that is worthy of playing, veteran that scored a bunch of goals, but you are trying to win a series here. Why not have the unknown of this first round star level Sabre prospect that maybe heats up in a couple of games or has one big game for us? Instead, we're going to put this guy in to play 7 minutes on the blue line that we know is not going to do anything to help us. It never made sense to me. And the logic that was used to defend it was just psychotic. It is what I will go to the grave. That is one of the dumbest weeks of my life because I could not believe people thought that dude, Strand, no offense to him, but deserved to be in the lineup over maybe you get a crazy good game out of Matt Savoie. Savoie has gone back to juniors, and he's way too good for the WHL. He shouldn't be down there. And that's more of a rules problem. You've had the AHL and the CHL, just they're not allowed to play in the AHL at a certain age, CHL agreement, but he should be in the AHL. He has 33 goals in 37 games since the Sabres returned him. 33 goals in 37 games. Unbelievable. He has 3 in the playoffs for Moose Jaw. 4 in the playoffs for Moose Jaw. Excuse me, that wasn't updated. I forgot he scored a second goal last night. He actually has 34 goals in 37 games in Moose Jaw since being returned. So he's been crazy good. If his junior season ends in time to catch the Amerks in the playoffs, I mean, they got to play him. They just got to play him. Learn your lesson. That series ended, by the way, last year with Savoie on the bench, and they lost 1-0. So could have used a guy that was out of your lineup that has some ability offensively. Savoie should play a big, meaningful role. And, if I'm being really picky here, I'd really love to see Savoie with Kulik and Rosine on the same line. I mean, that would be ideal, and that would really get Sabre fans in tune, I think, for the Amerks playoffs. So we'll see what they do. We'll see how Savoie's junior season continues. I know they're doing well with Moose Jaw, so we'll see how that goes for him. But the Amerks playoffs, we're still a couple of weeks away from that getting going. When we come back, mailbag before we wrap things up today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. We are presented by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood is the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, still got a while to go, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, final segment here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Sabres and Flyers, Friday night at 7 o'clock. It is time for a mailbag edition of today's show, which we always have fun with. These are coming from our texters on our Locked On Sabres text line. Join subtext.com/LockedOnSabres if you want to sign up. All right, question 1. Who's the Sabres version of trading away Stephon Diggs? I tackled this yesterday on the show. If you missed it, check it out. It's the Ryan O'Reilly trade for me. I really wonder if Terry Pegula wanted Brandon Beane to make this trade. And I wonder how much Beane wanted to. And we know that was the situation when they traded Ryan O'Reilly. I wonder about Pegula for that. Second, how much should the first round pick be in play this year? I think there should be a less than 5% chance we make the pick. I don't know about that. It's a top 10 pick. I mean, in theory, I agree with you. You package a top 10 pick with a star prospect and go get me a superstar. I like that, but I got to put it higher than 5% just because I don't know how likely that is to be available to the Sabres, how likely a player like that will become free. But if there's a guy, Brady Tkachuk or someone like that, Kaprizov, that becomes available, then I would agree with you that I would be mad if the Sabres made their first round pick. There's also a 5% chance, by the way, it's first overall. If that happens, you can't say less than 5% chance to make the pick if the pick is number 1 overall. That's at 5%. So it's got to be at least 5, because even this texter, I don't think would tell me that he'd want to trade the pick if they got Macklin Celebrini at number 1, especially given that he's a center. Next up, question 3. What's your ideal realistic lineup for next season, coaches included? All right, so this is something that I'm going to get really in the weeds on after the season is over, but I'll give you a rough draft of the lineup that I've got for the start of next season. Tage Thompson, Alex Tuch, JJ Peterka. I've loved that line together recently, the speed. I got Skinner with Cousins and Quinn. I just don't know where to put Skinner. That's going to be a tough one for me, but I'll put him with Cousins and Quinn. I've got Benson with Yuri Kulik, centered by Boone Jenner. I think Jenner is a realistic trade target. We've talked a lot about him in Sabres Twitter recently. Center, third-line guy. It would be a really strong third-line center. I think he makes sense between 2 kids on line 3. And then I got Krebs and Greenway in line 4, and I don't have a 4th guy. I don't want Girgensons back. Scott Lawton's come up, but I'm going to have to really dive into those 4th-line free agent types and see who makes sense for the Sabres. Coaching-wise, I would like to see Lindy Ruff be the coach. No doubt about it. And who were Lindy's assistant coaches back in the day? Well, Kevin Adams, but that's not happening. All right, next up, question 4. If we sign Peterka and Quinn as a future forward, because we know who he is, are we realistically looking next offseason for a third-line center to support Kulik and Skinner? I just mentioned Boone Jenner. I think veteran makes sense. I think Kulik can play center. Savoie can play center. I don't know that you want to put a kid, though, in that spot. And I wanted to see Peyton Krebs in that role. I'm not impressed. He's got to show me something in these final 6 games. You're not going to find me this summer campaigning for Peyton Krebs to be their third-line center. So, yes, I think veteran is probably the most realistic outcome for that spot. All right, next up. If Adams made a trade this offseason, would you rather have Laine or Boone Jenner? I'd go with Jenner. Laine, no thanks. He is bigger Victor Olofsson at this point in his career. I don't want any part of that. Should Levi, this is question 5, should Levi have a chance at being the starting goalie next year? I'll say yes, but not the first chance. Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has earned every right to be the starting goalie at the start of next season. But we saw how this season went. Devin Levi earned the right to get the starter's net at the beginning of the year. He played 4 games, and Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen stole the job from him. That's what should happen next year. You go into the year, you play Luukkonen the first 5 games of the year if you want, but whatever. You go into the year, and UPL's your number 1. And if he struggles a little bit, and Devin Levi shows up and is incredible, which I think is possible, then Devin Levi's your starter. So I think it could be the same situation next year that it would be this year, where you start one guy, but if your plan changes, then be willing to change it. So I would be willing to put Levi in there as the starter at some point. And finally, our final question of the day. Which prospects have the best chance of making the team next year? Also, what are your thoughts on Noah Ostlund, where he projects to be next year? Next year, I think Ostlund is almost undoubtedly in Rochester. I think the Sabres want him in North America. I think Ostlund has said that he will eventually be in North America. I think Rochester for sure for him. You never know, though. Benson surprised me, so maybe Ostlund could too. The prospects I think have the best chance, if I were going to rank them in order, I would go Kulik number 1. I don't know who to put 2, actually. I might go a tie for second with Rosine and Matt Savoie. I think Savoie excites me more, but timeline-wise, Rosine makes more sense. I might go Rosine because Savoie, I could put him in Rochester, and that's still a step up for him, right? That's a better level of competition for him than juniors. So maybe start the year for him in Rochester. Whereas Rosine, if he gets passed by another Sabre prospect that's younger than him, then I'm starting to wonder if he'll ever be an NHLer. I'd like to see Rosine in the NHL next year, in whatever role, bottom 6. But it's time. You've played for him, what is it, 2 or 3 full seasons in Rochester? It's 2 full seasons in Rochester, and that was after a year in Sweden. At 21 years old, he'll be 20. No, he is 20. He just turned 21. 21-year-old season, I think I want him in the NHL, getting a crack at it. So I might put him number 2, Savoie number 3, Osland number 4. All right, it's going to do it for us today here on the Locked On Sabres podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Sabres and Flyers tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. We'll talk more about the Flyers. We talked a little about John Tortorella yesterday. Danny Briere, how's his season going as Flyers GM? We'll talk about them and comparing them to the Sabres tomorrow. Stay tuned for that, and be sure to check out Locked On Sports today. They'll be talking lots about Stephon Diggs today. If you're tired of all that shouting, ESPN, Fox Sports, be sure to check out Locked On Sports today, YouTube, or the Free Fire TV channels app as well. Talk to you tomorrow here on the Locked On Sabres podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.